Hello, and welcome to WorthPoint's Chats with Harry Rinker. I'm Greg Watkins. I'm with WorthPoint. I'm in Atlanta at the WorthPoint Towers. And Harry, where are you today?
Well, I'm in Kentwood today. We'll be doing the show next week from Florida, but back home, as you can see from the clutter here in the office, I'm going to come up a little closer so we can hide some of the mess. No, but we're back here. Actually, been away over the weekend. I was in Reading, Pennsylvania, doing a 3-day appraisal clinic for the Southeast Pennsylvania Home and Garden Show, and we'll talk about some of the things that I saw there. We want to remind our listeners to this live on YouTube that we do have the chat feature up. That if you have a question or something that you'd like to do or ask us about, we'll be glad to talk with you. That's part of the fun of this. We've got an object or two to look at. Got a little bit of news in the trade too that I think is kind of fun to talk about. So there we go. Anything on your mind, Greg?
Well, it's spring finally here in Atlanta, so we're all as opposed to the bitter cold that we had. As cold as other places in the country. But yeah, we're enjoying the sun here.
Well, you know,
specifically about antiques. We'll see what you've got to talk about.
Well, the thing about it is, let's talk about spring, because spring is a great time. You know, living up north, you have kind of the summer season and spring, summer, fall season, and the winter season down in Florida, and it's kind of like we're all waiting for the great openings. And we've had an early spring up here in Michigan, so that the end result is that it's not quite spring really here yet, but we are in the time zone change anyway. But the situation is that the last weekend in March, which is when the big Rinker extravaganza is in Kutztown and Adamstown, is kind of the symbolic week when everybody comes up, all the dealers that winter in the South come up north with all their fresh merchandise, and then a week later is Brimfield, which is really kind of the opening of the outdoor season. And then here in Michigan, the barometer is Allegan, the great flea market at Allegan, which I've been to a number of times. Actually, not too far down the road from me, about an hour to the south. Occurs only on Sundays, which makes it a little rough for me because I do What You Got, my radio show, Sunday mornings from 8 to 10, and then I have to quick hop in the car and run down there. But it's always a lot of fun to do that. So the fun thing is, when I came out here to Michigan, though, I found out a lot of the antique malls had winter cabin sales. Hey, you know, part of the thing is that in the antiques and collectibles trade, we have to learn to use the same merchandising tactics other people do. And long about the middle of February, early part of March, a lot of the antique malls have in here what they call cabin fever sales and give people a chance to get out. And this was a good year for them because the weather has been really favorable. And not just that, but it's also led to a bit of an early start in the estate sale season. Now, estate sales are usually around the clock, but it's tough in the winter because of the holidays and also because of the threat of bad weather. In fact, one of my friends, Barb Jersey, who has Wonder Woman estate sales, was telling me that she had a estate sale on, I think it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it snowed to the point where she sent out all kinds of notices, says, don't come today, don't come today. She got about 30 calls from people who must have mushed their dog teams to the sale, complaining that she wasn't open. But I mean, it's not a good business here where you're risking life and limb, actually. But no, the spring season is kind of fun, and I think we're all looking forward to the outdoor show season. It adds a lot to the whole festivities of the program, and you know, I'm watching very closely. We lost a lot of the big antique shows, or a number of major indoor antique shows in the winter canceled. It's nice to see the Philadelphia Antique Show back on the books after a year hiatus. But the big news a couple of weeks ago was the cancellation of the Pier Show in New York, both for March and November. And there's a question about whether that show will ever be back. Now, I have to tell you, when Irene Stella ran the piers back in the day, as we old-timers say, that show was on 3 piers. There was one pier that was entirely antiques, one pier that was 20th century collectibles, and another pier that was kind of a mix between the two. And you could do that show in a day. And ultimately, after Irene left it and some of the new owners took place, that show got condensed to 1 pier. and finally it's dissolved. Now I'm really going to write a column for my Rinker on Collectibles column on that, because of the fact that it really troubles me to see that show go away. But one of the problems that the promoter had was that dealers wouldn't commit long term. They didn't want to pay 6 months, 8 months in advance for a booth space, and the promoter really needs to know how many people they can count on. They need that advance payment money for advertising, for insurance, for a lot of things. And finally, the promoter said, "Look, 80% of you say you're going to come back, but less than 20% of you paid up." And he said, "We just can't run business like that anymore." So the result is that show's gone away. It's a huge time out there right now. A number of shows up in New England have canceled and so forth. A lot of us are a little bit concerned about that. Part of it has to do also with some of the antique show managers are getting older, and we're not seeing younger people come in. We talk about the fact that there's no young collectors in the trade, and there's no young dealers, or there are some young dealers coming into the trade, but not to the extent that we've had in the past. What we're talking about is the traditional sales venues like shows and flea markets and that type of thing. But what we don't have also is young promoters. The people that I knew in the 70s are not, well, actually the people I knew in the 70s are in their 70s now, like me. And so, if we don't get some young promoters in here to get these shows, and this whole business of consolidation, all these things about trying to buy shows and consolidate them under single ownership, that doesn't work in this business. This business is still a one-on, hands-on basis. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're doing these weekly WorthPoint chats with me. And by the way, I think we have a place where we can encourage people, if they have a question they'd like us to talk about in one of these chats, that they can actually send us an email, or if they have an object they'd like us to discuss, they can send us some pictures and a question about that too. And there you go. Here you are. It's called community@worthpoint.com. And if you'd like to submit an item for me to identify and evaluate, send your photographs and everything you know about the item. And this is very helpful. Also, when you're sending photographs, if you can put some kind of a scale in there, either a ruler or a quarter, a dollar bill, or something that lets us take a look at that. But it's also important to know everything about the object as well. While I don't mind playing guess the goodies, photographs are a big help. Provenance is a big help too. How did you acquire these pieces? Because there are reproductions that go back to the 30th century. Whoops, are you sneaking one in here on me right now?
Nope.
What are we doing here? All right. Anyway, we got
we're still on you.
No, since you started that, we were talking about optics. Got an email in from someone in the Reading area. It had an old photograph and record combination, like a console unit. Now, I don't know if you remember from the 50s, those so-called big entertainment centers that used to have a turntable in them, and maybe a tape deck as well, and certainly a radio in them. They were the major piece of furniture in a home. And someone called up and said, "Well, I have this piece from the 1920s or 30s. It's a combination radio and phonograph, and it needs some work, and it's not quite working right." And he wanted to know something about it. Well, one of the reasons we like pictures is oftentimes if I get a hold of a picture, it's there. He was describing the radio for me, and I went up on the website, and there's a lot of wonderful websites for radio dedication up there. And the radio, the unit without the phonograph, is an R32 RCA unit. But with the phonograph in it, it's an RE45 unit. Now, this is a fun unit to talk about the history of this. And once again, I just have to say, the internet's wonderful. I mean, there's still a lot of reasons why you still need textbooks and reference books, but it was fun researching this. And thanks to actually a person that listed the item on eBay for sale, had some wonderful information about it. Now, I actually went to a website first called Victor Victrola.com, VICTOR hyphen VICTROLA, Victor-Victrola.com. And got this information. The R45 was a combination radio and phonograph set designed and purchased in 1920 and produced in 1929, just as RCA was preparing to purchase the Victor talking machine. So we know that. And it said there were approximately 108,000 produced between 1929 and 1930. It sold new for $275. But because of the Depression, by the time the units got there and into the dealer's hands, they were such an overstock that by the early 1930s, they were selling as low as $90 a unit. Now, when you're evaluating one of these, I mean, take one look at this, and you're clearly evident that this piece needed a lot of work. The cabinet needed to be refinished. The phonograph has all the elements there to make it work, but it certainly needs to be totally overhauled and cleaned up. In fact, it looks like it got a couple of generations of dust in there. And so the guy says, "What's it worth?" And then you ask the person, "Well, does it work?" And they say, "No." At which point he's looking at about $25 to $30 worth of radio cabinet and tubes. The fortunate thing is that there are, if you look hard enough, people that can still restore these things. In this case, the person was located in the Reading, Pennsylvania area, and fortunately for him, okay, there was a fellow that operates out of Reddingers at Kutztown that can restore this from him. Now, up and restored, these machines can sell for $500-600. Now, you may have to pay that. My guess is the cabinet looks pretty good to me, and so maybe just some furniture renuisance or some light, maybe just soap and water can bring the cabinet up to stuff. The tubes and the parts have to be there. But I got involved in an interesting discussion with the radio guys about restoring radios and things like this. And they say, "Oh, well, you take the old capacitors out and replace them with all these modern parts and so forth, and it just looks like that." But my question is, why would you do that? I mean, don't you want one that has the original parts? I mean, you can still get tubes and stuff for it. I don't understand why you'd want to re-gut it and do all kinds of things with it. But anyway, there it is. And so what do we have in terms of value with this? Well, what we have in terms of value with all of this is that we have right now to maybe somebody who just wants to take a whack at it or the tubes, $25-35. But in terms of somebody that wants to maybe take the time to restore it and bring it back up and stuff, could be about $350-400. The other thing too is that I'm always amazed when I go up on the internet. You think, oh, you can't find parts for any of this stuff. But the truth of the matter is that you can find grills and fabrics and everything else for these old-time radios. I had an interesting situation happen to me in Reading. My wife would like to have an old-fashioned cylinder music box, and I got contacted by somebody who had an old 24-inch wide cylinder music box from the beginning of the late 19th, early 20th century, but it played 6 tunes. Now, it's interesting when you start to do research work, a 6-tune music box is not a desirable music box. I mean, it's nice, but the problem is that the real desirable ones play 8, 10, or 12 tunes, or maybe even as high as 20, but 6 is the low end of the rung. So, that impacted price. It was in a gorgeous case with all kinds of inlay. It was fine. But the guy and I agreed upon a price once I inspected it. Well, when I inspected it, I found out that the tines, the little things that are struck when the cylinder goes around, so about 10 or 15 of them were broken off. Oh, he says it doesn't affect the sound that much. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, well, maybe. but then the stop mechanism didn't work, and the change tune mechanism was questionable. And I finally said to him, here's the deal. I'm going to take into account what it's going to cost me to restore this box before I buy it. And I said, I think I'm looking at a $500 to $1,000 bill. And now, this box would be worth X if it's fully restored, but I'm going to take that money off. And I said, and furthermore, I said, I don't know enough about restoring music boxes, although we have one of the finest music box restorers sitting north of me in Sparta, PA. But I didn't know if it was going to cost me $200 or $1,000 or $1,500 to restore it. And we finally came within $100 of a buy price, and guess what? I walked away. I mean, I understand about everybody wanting things room ready, and I understand about the restoration stuff. But when I don't know enough about restoration costs and the rest of it, I'm just going to walk away. If I have to pay $2,500 or $3,000 for a box fully operable and fully restored, I may do that, as opposed to take my chance on the other one, because restoration costs can go through the roof. And this is what people don't understand when they're not selling working appliances. Well, with that in mind, let's go to an appliance that did work when I saw it this weekend. I'd actually asked the owner to send me some pictures because I was curious the heck about it. And she sent me some pictures of a Roger Maris Mickey Mantle radio. And and here's one of the fun things about this radio is that it came with all this stuff attached to it. Now, first of all, for those of you old enough to remember, Mantle and Maris were in pursuit of Babe Ruth's home run record in 1960. And everybody and their mother tried to jump on the bandwagon doing all kinds of endorsement stuff and Mantle or Maris or Mantle and Maris type of stuff. So in walks this radio, and what a neat little radio. Now, the radio itself is in kind of a wood-stained cabinet. The batter to the left is just a generic batter, but he's got a Yankees uniform on. I mean, it's not Mantle, it's not Maris, but he's got a Yankee uniform. But the fun thing is the dial. Look at the dial. It's an AM radio only, not FM. But look at the dial. It's a baseball bat with a ball turn thing and an on-off knob. So it's really fabulous. But then the guy had this card that must have been some kind of a baseball card or stuff. And doesn't it show Maris and Mantle with the radio marked 1960? Now, you know, when you go up on the internet and you look for this kind of information, most of it says 61, 62. But, you know, here is a little proof that maybe it was a little earlier. So the fun thing was, okay, you've got that. Now, I said to the guy, does it work? He says, yes, it does. I said, wow, how do you know? He said, I plugged it in. Man, you plug in any old appliance, you take your life in your hands. But then he says, oh, and by the way, I have an extra set of tubes. And he shows me the 5 tubes he's got just in case the tubes in the radio burn out. I mean, you talk about neat things. Now, the only thing he doesn't have is the box. And there is a box that comes with it because I did some research work on it. But then there was a thing on the upper right-hand corner of the radio that said Stellar. And I'm thinking, you know, I never heard of a Stellar radio. So I started tracking all around the internet. And what I found is that Stellar was a trade name for the Astra Trading Company in New York, which obviously was running stuff in at the time, probably from Japan or Hong Kong. And so it was an import service. They actually made transistor radio. And by 65, they were making stuff out of Hong Kong, although there is a possibility that this, I believe, could have come out of Japan. So, you know, talk about opportunistic kind of things. Now, the fun thing was researching the value of this. Went up on a Leland's auction and found one in 2012 that sold for $643. I mean, and that was the base price. With the buyer's premium, it was, and by the way, I shouldn't even call it buyer's premium. You know, I call those things buyer's penalty. But anyway, it was $771.68. And I'm thinking, wow, it's a lot more than I told the people I thought their radio was worth. Because when I'm doing these appraisal clinics and doing it off the top of my head, quite honestly, I just be very conservative. But then there's a guy on eBay selling one, asking price. Now, again, buy it now price is the same as the get it now price. But he's asking $950. Then I found an auction by Robert Edwards where one brought $1,276. And then I found another one that had where the box was their Huggins and Scott's auction. I don't have a date on that one. And they were dating the radio as 1962. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that one sold for $1,000. So what did this guy have? This couple have when they brought the radio CB? They had one that was probably worth somewhere, I think, on the downside, conservative side, $750 to $800 easily. And maybe if they get it in the hands of the right auctioneer, it might sell for $1,000. But remember, if you send it to an auctioneer to be sold, the auctioneer is going to take a commission, whether it's 10% or 15 cents. So if he gets $1,000 and he's charging you 10% commission, you're only getting $900. So to you, the radio's only worth $900. Forget the hammer price in terms of dealing with that. But it was a fun piece to see. And of course, I was a young man during the 61 season when Maris and Mantle were on the great pursuit of the record. So it was there. Also, you know, one of the things we want to do here on these chats is keep an eye on what's going on in the trade out there. And I get a lot of press releases from auction houses and so forth, but across my computer came a press release from Freeman's. Now, Freeman's is one of those grand old auction houses. There was a time when Freeman's in Philadelphia was the #1 auction house in the U.S. I mean, it sold enormous important collections in the 1890s and 1900s. Eventually, Park Galleries and Bernay Galleries in New York were also leading houses at the time. Eventually, they went together and became Park Bernay. And I am old enough, are you ready for this, to remember Park Bernay auction catalogs. Of course, eventually they get bought out by Sotheby's, and because they became Sotheby's Park Bernay and then eventually Sotheby's. But here's Freeman's. A number of years ago, some English interests bought into Freeman's. Now, the Freeman family, this auction house was established in Philadelphia in 1805. I mean, talk about early American auction houses. And it's been in the Freeman family ever since. But so often as in families, sometimes the next generation is not as good as or as able as the first generation. And the current gentleman that owns the auction house, Bo Freeman, nice fellow, I mean, I really like him, is nevertheless not as sharp as his father and grandfather were. And so what happened is a group of people bought in there. A management team was brought in, and they have been bought out by a firm abroad. But they're still going to keep Freeman's, and they're going to try to run it and make it competitive. Now, I admire them because they moved into the modernist field. They moved into a lot of Asian material. They built on their strength in jewelry and books and manuscripts and that type of stuff, and they seem to be doing very well. Now, the new firm is called Hannah, Alistair, and Paul, which, of course, nobody knows in the U.S., but it's a foreign firm. But what's interesting is, let me just show you about this thing about being global. Freeman's currently has locations in Boston, Richmond, Virginia, Charlotte, Virginia, Wayne, Pennsylvania, and Beverly Hills, with an international presence in London and Edinburgh because of the strong alliance with the auction house Lion and Turnbull, and is now going to expand to Hong Kong. And this is where it's at. You know, America, which was once one of the great centers along with London and Geneva, is going to start having to understand, I mean, well, let's say America, let's say New York, London, and Geneva were the big three locations. Everybody's out in the countryside now. Even Hinman's is out there, Sotheby's is out there. We live in a global marketplace, and I think this sale and this whole business here is all part of the expanding global marketplace. Now, this isn't the low-end stuff. This is all about the high-end stuff. But here's an American firm being bought out once again by London. I mean, if you stop thinking about it, Sotheby's and Christie's are franchises of the English firms. So is Bonham's in the States. Now we've got Freeman's. I mean, who do we have left as the premier American-owned auction house? Well, the answer is simple. Heritage Galleries down in Texas, down in Dallas, Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. So, I mean, there's a lot of changes going on out there in the trade, and they are never ending. Well, let's see, what else can we talk about here today? Oh, I had an interesting thing at the appraisal clinic in Reading. Guy walks in with a Lionel 202 engine. Now, that doesn't mean anything to you, does it, Greg?
Not specifically that number, but I am aware of the Lionel trains.
Yeah, but
although I grew up in the era of HO scale before.
How could you I can't even see them with my glasses at this point. No, but the good news about Lionel, American Flyer, and many of those other things, they had separate numbers on all their cars. So if you have old train equipment at home, all you have to do is know the manufacturer and the part number, and you can look it up. So he shows me this 202 engine. Didn't bring the tender in, said he had a bunch of cars at home. He set up the track at Chris time, ran it for his grandchildren, which I told him I thought was a great idea. And he says, well, what do you think it's worth? And I said, well, I think the engine is worth about 135 to 150 bucks, maybe. He says, what do you mean? He says, why was it a trade show 5 years? They were asking 650 bucks for it. And I said, yeah, but 650 bucks is an asking price. It's not a getting price. And I said, buddy, you wouldn't believe what happened in the last 5 years. And so, he said, well, I don't believe you. And I said, no, I said, maybe 200. I said, but so now, so I make notes when I do these appraisal clinics because, I don't like to be wrong. So, so did I get back to the hotel that night, the computer, and I go up there and type in Lionel 2020. And what do you think they're selling for? 165 to 200 bucks. The engines. Now, he had some other equipment too, and we calculated that price too. But, everybody, if they see an object with a price, or worse yet, that they paid a certain price for something, they think that thing is always going to start at that price and keep going up and up and up and up. And that all changed in the 90s. Seriously, it did. We're looking at declining prices more than ever. And speaking of declining prices, in the Is Harry Rinker incredibly dumb class, in the late 1980s, I turned down $3,000 for my Hummel number 1 1971 Christmas plate. $3,000. I turned it down on the old Dutchy attitude that if it's worth that today, it's got to be worth more in the future. So I was doing a walkthrough appraisal while I was in Reading, and sure enough, there was a 1972, which I thought was the first plate, but it turned out it was really 1971. So I thought, well, I'll go up. And last time I checked the 1971 plate, it was selling for $385 or $300 to $385, and I'm thinking, well, that's all right. And then I went up and checked on eBay, and I should not do this. This is not good for my mental health, Greg. Those plates are now down below 50 bucks. Actually, the truthful, they're down below 35 bucks. And the number 2 plate, if you can get 20 for the 1972 plate, which is the second one, if you can get 20 bucks for that, that's a lot, except for one idiot. We're going to have to do an idiot price of the week presentation. There was one guy on eBay asking $3,300 for a Hummel number 1 plate. My guess is
he was probably the guy.
He probably the guy.
Probably the guy who bought 3,000 way back when.
Well, that's right. He had no price guide. And he thought, well, it was 3,000 in there. I'll just add another 10%, just take a modest profit. He probably paid $2 for it at the garage sale. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I was down in Winter Park, Florida, a couple weeks ago, and I went into an antique shop down there, and I walk in, and there is a glass case with 3 shelves of Hummels and a big sign, 75% off asking price. Well, the asking price were the prices from Miller's Hummel Price Guide, which everybody in the trade knows that if you have Miller's Price Guide, you cut the prices by 3/4. So if he says 400, it's 100. If he says 100, it's 25 bucks. But the point is, he was using that as a gimmick to get current fair market value for some of the stuff. But hey, but then I forget where else I was. Some woman brought something in, and she said to me, well, if that's all they're worth, I'm going to keep them. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, they're going to go up in time again, aren't they? And I said, no, there are some things that will never go up again. Which again reminds me of funny stories. A guy walked in with a folk art cane, just a long twig, and up on the top there was a face, and there were some knots there, so it had like a round beard coming out of here and a long nose and that type of thing. And he said, what do you think this is worth? And I said, well, it's just a neat folk art cane, maybe 100, 200, 150, 200 and a quarter or somewhere in there. I mean, he says, well, somebody offered me $1,200 for it. He's an Indian collector. He swears this was made by American Indians. And I got news for you. American Indians were not carving folk art canes on the frontier. And so I said to the guy, call him up. Get the money. Do you know who it is? Yes. I said, tell him you'll take the $1,200. Or tell him you can have it for $1,500. Really take him to the cleaners. But he's going to wind up with a $125 cane. And this is one of the things that two Two things come out of that story. You ready for the first one? One, experts don't know what they're talking about a lot. And this is one of the things that you have to be very careful of in the antiques trade, is self-professed experts that act like gods, because they really don't often know what they're talking about. And the second thing is, when some idiot offers you 5 to 10 times what something is worth, kiss the hand and take the money. We call that a light a candle price. You know why? Because you should go to church, light a candle, and thank God he delivered that guy to you. And then the guy said to me again, well, I don't need the money. I'm not going to sell it now. I said, if that guy dies, you're in big trouble. Sell it now. But anyway, enough of all of that. Well, we passed, as they say on Car Talk, we shot another perfectly good half hour here. But nevertheless, we've had some fun today talking about a bunch of stuff.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And you've been very quiet. So, you have to come up with some next week.
I need to have some stories. You can just think through them off the top of your head. I have to do some research.
Well, you know what? But we do need our viewers of these YouTube videos and our WorthPoint subscribers to send in their questions, because we'd like to respond to them as well. Also, want to remind everybody, Antiques and Collectibles Summer Camp is coming up in July. Three really great courses. One on researching antiques and collectibles, 2-day course. One on paintings, prints, and watercolors, and another one on toys, games, and puzzles. There you can see how you can find. Just go up to my website, harryrinker.com, and click on the Institute logo, and the information is up there in the registration. We're really starting to get, I'm very pleased we're getting a lot of registrations in right now on that. Well, Greg, it's been a fun day again. We'll do this next week on Tuesday at 2 o'clock from a hotel in Naples, Florida. While my wife is attending a meeting and I am not on the beach, I will be in my room to do this. Lucky you. But anyway.
Well, I hope you get to get out to some antique shops while before and after we broadcast.
In Naples, Florida, are you out of your mind? I know.
I've never been to Naples.
I don't have to know I can't afford things. That's Markup City. All right. Take care.
Okay. Let's talk about where to go for good buys.
Oh, you want to talk?
All right.
Yeah. Well, I'll see what I can find in Naples. We'll talk about it next week.
Okay. All right. Well, then we've like Harry says, we've shot another good half hour, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. When we do another chat with Harry.